Hello, so continuing on this weekly contest 92, the second problem is difference between ones and zeros in row and column. So we have a binary matrix grid, right? And we want to create a new matrix diff that is created using this procedure here. And we want to return that diff matrix at the end, right? Now, what are these operations that we're gonna do? So the number of ones in the ith row, let's say it's ones row I, and the number of ones in the jth column, let's store it in ones column j, and then the number of zeros in the ith row we store it in zeros row, the number of zeros in jth column we store it in zeros column. So basically, one's row will contain the number of ones in each row. One's column will contain the number of ones in each column. And then zero rows will contain the number of zeros in each row. And zero columns will contain the number of zeros in every column, right? So basically we need to collect the number of ones in each row in each column and the number of zeros in each row and in each column. And what we want to do at the end, after we do that, is just create a matrix where the diff at position I and j is the number of ones in row I plus the number of ones in column j minus the number of zeros in row I and the number of zeros in column j, right? So pretty straightforward, at least description so far. And if we take a look at the constraint here, we can see that it's 10 to the power of 5, right? So this tells us that, well, we could just definitely do in O of n in terms of n being the number of elements in the matrix. We can fill all of these for maps or counters, and then at the end we can create this diff. So we can definitely do that, do it in a brute force way. Yeah, so let's do it. It should be straightforward. We can definitely store, so the easiest thing to do would be to store in each, to create a map sort of for each of these four things that we need. So we can just write that. We'll optimize this later, right? And then we can just go through for every row and every cell, right? So for every row in the grid, and go through every row and get the cell value. And now, depending on the cell value, we can increment either the number of ones or the number of zeros, right? So if cell is equal to 1, we need to increment the number of ones in the row I and the number of ones in column I, right? Now, if it's equal to 0, then we need to increment the number of zeros, right? We need to increment these two. And so we do that. Should be straightforward there as well. Okay, and now once we do all of these, we can just create our diff matrix. So our diff matrix will need to be first we'll just initialize it with 0 values, right? For columns and rows, we need to initialize those two variables. So I'll just do that here, right? And now we can just go through for each row, a range of rows, right? And then we can go through each column and just fill using this condition here, right? So this would be columns. And here we just need to so this is one's rows, right? So we just need to replace to use our maps here. So this here, by the way, with default dict int, we'll just initialize it to 0. So the first value would be 0. That way we don't have to check if I is present here, initialize it to 0, right? Okay, so this is one's columns, right? So at j, and this is zeros for rows at I, and this is zeros for columns at j, right? And then at the end, we just want to return diff, right? So let's run this. Let's submit. Okay, so that passes test cases. Sorry. Now, in terms of time complexity, here we are doing, let's say, O of n by m, right? Because we are collecting here, we are doing a loop that is O of n by m. Same thing here, O of n by m. So in terms of time, it's O of n by m. in terms of space, we are using these different arrays and these diff arrays, and each of them is up to n by m, so same thing. So this is time and space. So space is the same thing, right? Now, one thing to note here is we don't need to record ones and zeros separately, right? Because you can see here, for the number of zeros, we'll just subtract, right? So let's just, for each zero, let's record -1. And since for each one we'll add, let's just for each one record +1, right? So that way we just need for each row and for each column, we need the difference, right? And so here we can just have diff rows +1, diff columns +1, and this would be diff rows, diff columns, right? But here for 0 we need -1, right? And this way basically we can just add them up because we already did the subtraction, right? And here, just to make this easier, if it's a cell equal to 1, then we want to add 1, right? Otherwise we want to add -1, right? And so here, this way we don't need to do this, we can just do +d. We don't need to do this if and else. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Let's run this. So this is if, sorry. And let's submit. So that just simplifies it a little bit. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. You could try other solutions, but I think this is good enough. Still same time and same complexity. Yeah, so please like and subscribe, and see you on the next one.